Mr. Speaker, if he wants to know who is the bad actor that broke the immigration system, why doesn't he do what he loves to do the most? Look in the mirror.
Welcome back to Moose on the Loose. My name's David. Today's episode here of the House session, Pierre once again destroys Justin Trudeau. Trudeau is noticeably frazzled. Again, he has been for a while. Poilievre drills down one thing after the other. One of the best parts is when Pierre Poilievre brings up the fact that Trudeau said at his climate conference in South America there that mothers in Canada should prioritize climate change over feeding their children. Let's jump into this.
This Prime Minister in 9 years doubled housing costs, doubled the debt, doubled gun crime, doubled food bank use, and up until a minute ago, he had a minister with a double identity. The Prime Minister knew the minister was directing his business illegally from inside cabinet. He knew the minister had claimed there was another Randy when there was no other Randy. He knew that the minister had falsely claimed to be Indigenous in order to take money away from real Indigenous people, and yet he stood by him up until yesterday. Why is it that he always stands up for corruption on his own side?
Mr. Speaker, the member for Edmonton Centre has stepped down from cabinet to focus on clearing these allegations. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition talks about the importance of speaking up. The reality is his MPs are no longer voices for their communities. They are his voice in their communities. That's not how this place is supposed to work, Mr. Speaker. We are focused on making sure that we're investing in Canadians, supporting them with the kinds of supports for housing, supports for dental, supports for childcare that Canadians need, while all he offers is cuts and austerity.
That's right.
Muzzling caucus members. This is the guy who fired the first Indigenous Attorney General because she refused to defend his corruption. She said, and I quote, "A Prime Minister committed to true reconciliation would have removed Randy and the other Randy from cabinet long ago. Instead, we have to get to watch white people play ancestry wheel of fortune so shameful and extremely destructive." Why is it that he fired a real Indigenous minister for telling the truth while trying to keep in place a fake Indigenous minister who told falsehoods?
Let's not forget the Colombian cocoa white powder keg Randy. I think there's 3 Randys now.
Mr. Speaker, telling the truth would be MPs continuing to stand up to advocate for their communities. But the leader of the opposition has asked them not to be their communities' voices here in Ottawa, but instead be his voice in their communities. The reality is he's afraid of what they might say about him, because there is no call to be muzzling MPs this way.
Trudeau's a train wreck. He just stumbling over his words. He doesn't even know what he's saying.
Mr. Speaker, this from a Prime Minister who has 20 caucus members that have signed a letter that they're ready to fire him. Why wouldn't they? This is the guy who's doubled housing costs, doubled gun crime, doubled food bank use, doubled the national debt, kept in place a minister with a double identity. Even his own caucus members know he's not worth the cost, crime, or corruption, so if he's not afraid of anything, why doesn't he call a carbon tax election like Canadian?
Yeah, it's time.
Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition just made very clearly the point that the MPs on this side of the House are free to share their opinions publicly, even when they're ones that I disagree with.
This is hilarious considering MPs back here were secretly messaging the Conservatives in bathrooms to trying to get rid of Justin Trudeau. Wow.
Colleagues, the more time that we spend here in the chair interrupting the process so that we get order in the House, the fewer questions we will be able to have and fewer answers we'll be able to have in question periods. So please control yourselves.
There's no answers in this House.
Right Honourable Prime Minister from the top.
Mr. Speaker, in the minds of Conservatives, we just saw a big gotcha moment where I admitted that Liberal MPs are free to speak their minds and voice their opinions even when we have disagreements. That was astonishing to the members of the Conservative Party because they're not allowed to do that. They are not allowed to speak to the media. policies on housing. That is the real scandal in this place, Mr. Speaker.
That's not the real scandal. What a ridiculous statement. We've got a minister pretending to be Indigenous with an Indigenous company to get government contracts. He has the audacity to say that. This guy is the king gaslighter. Anything he accuses someone else of is something he's guilty of. Come on.
I am.
Oh, sorry. They can take our sponsored travel.
Wow.
You know, families are telling me, they're telling me that their cell phone bills and their internet bills are so high that they have to cut back on monthly costs, like their swimming lessons for their kids. The Liberals are hurting Canadians by taxing essentials. And King Cut and the Conservatives are going to make things even worse. They want to cut the benefit for children, the child benefits, that can lose families $600 a month. Now, will the Liberals stop taxing essentials like cell phone and internet bills right now?
Here it is again. This is Jagmeet's big play to get rid of GST off essentials. He thinks this is going to make him prime minister. This is a joke, man.
If the NDP wants to join us in making life more affordable for Canadians, all they have to do is put an end to the obstruction of the work of Parliament that the Conservatives are leading on. Parliament is supposed to do the work of Canadians in making their lives better, but with the Conservative Party's obstruction, there are bills being slowed down, there are measures around dental care, around Indigenous services, school foods. These are things that we need to unblock in this House, and if the NDP will help us stop the obstructionism by the Conservatives, we can deliver for Canadians.
Yes, the NDP are doing continuance motions as well as the Bloc to keep this going on, so they have to give over those documents to the RCMP, the SDTC scandal. Trudeau wants his buddy Jagmeet here to get him out of a sticky situation, but Jagmeet wants to be prime minister. He's going to take advantage of that while still supporting Trudeau to get his pension. It's like one Riesly rat against another.
He's now admitted that the immigration system is broken after 9 years of his government. He blames bad actors. So let's put our detective hat on and find out who those bad actors were. Who was the head of the federal government that increased permits for temporary foreign workers by 154%? Who was the head of the federal government that issued 211% more permits for international students and a population growth plan that boosted growth by 300%? Wow. Can we identify who was that bad actor?
Bad actors, stand up.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, following a pandemic that had devastated our economy in a short-term way, Canadians needed and businesses needed extra support, so asked for more temporary foreign workers, asked for more international students, and we gave them. Our economy grew. Our economy got back faster than the United States, got back faster than many other countries of the world. And then we're now in a different situation where we've had to step up and reduce immigration numbers to make sure that our housing issues can catch up. This is what a responsible government does. It puts forward solutions that are right in the moment.
No, this is what a greedy man who owns a lot of land does to make himself rich. Just say it, Trudeau.
And corrects them when they're no longer needed.
I don't think we found the bad actor yet. Because he blames it on labor market needs, but the biggest growth happened in non-labor market immigration. For example, he boosted permits for international students by 211%, and refugees by 726%. That has nothing to do with filling job vacancies. And when it comes to temporary foreign workers, he allowed more to go to places with already high unemployment. So once again, who was the bad actor that made these terrible decisions?
Mr. Speaker, these little performances that the Leader of the Opposition puts on are not fooling anyone. The only thing he is interested in is his own interests, his own quest for power. He is not asking he's asking his MPs to not be strong voices for their communities, including in communities that are relying on the investments in their housing so that they can respond to growing populations and housing pressures caused by increasing population. But he would rather muzzle his MPs in order to look good when he's doing his little show.
Speaker, he's not helping us find the bad actor. It's like there's been someone else running the country for the last 9 years while the system has come crumbling down. He claims that he cares about housing, but on that subject, maybe we'll ask him this question. Who is the head of the government that was warned by its public service 3 years ago that increasing population growth by 300% would cause the massive housing shortages that we see today?
Mr. Speaker, with the little performances, when he would rather not admit that when he was Stephen Harper's failed housing minister, he created a total of 6 affordable housing units across the country. He was part of a government that completely pulled back from any investments in housing. And yes, as a government, we've had to step up, make record investments.
The federal government's responsibility is not to build houses. It's to employ policies that makes life good for Canadians, which involves doing math on the immigration numbers and our housing starts. The only reason they're having to get involved in the housing business is because they've destroyed it with their immigration increases.
When I was housing minister, we had 1 home built for every 1.5 people added to the population, which meant we were adding houses faster than we needed to, and we were providing affordable homes of half the cost of today. Last year, they added 1 home for every 5 new people, the biggest housing deficit in history. So once again, who was the bad actor running the government that was warned by its officials that all of this out-of-control population increase would cause a housing shortage?
The government is there to create policy that lets the builders of Canada thrive. Justin Trudeau thinks that he can take all of our tax dollars, flush it off to random cities as some housing accelerator, and it solves the problem, and he's doing some amazing thing. It's not.
Mr. Speaker, the government in which the Leader of the Opposition was their failed housing minister deliberately chose to get out of the business of housing, which meant we needed to step up with a national housing strategy in 2017 and with record investments, not just to create more housing, but to change the way housing is built in communities across this country. That is money put into the pockets of municipalities to invest, to densify, to rapidify, to accelerate the permitting. Money that he's promising to take away, that his MPs are trying to speak out to defend.
He's noticeably shooken again today. He's been like this for a while. He's lost it. Like, this narcissist just can't step down.
Mr. Speaker, when I was housing minister, housing was half the cost. When I was jobs minister, I actually cut down the number of temporary foreign workers to make sure Canadians got the job. But the bad actor he's referring to is the same head of government that allowed 211% more study permits for people who weren't supposed to be working. He allowed 154% more temporary foreign workers while Canadians were looking for jobs, and 726% more refugees. Mr. Speaker, if he wants to know who is the bad actor that broke the immigration system, why doesn't he do what he loves to do the most? Look in the mirror.
It's true. Can Trudeau really deny this? The guy, hey there, handsome,
The irony of this, as the Leader of the Opposition likes to rhyme off facts and figures, is he won't even take a briefing that will allow him to understand the security threats facing this country. For some strange reason that he will not admit to, he has refused to get...
Did he just Freudian slip there? Are you running this as a company, one that you can just squeeze all the money out of, Trudeau?
his security clearance. He's refused to take the briefings necessary to keep Canadians safe. So anytime he chooses to rhyme off facts and figures, we know that he is not actually caring about Canadians, he's caring about himself.
So the difference, we want to axe the tax, he wants to axe the facts.
Mr. Speaker of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister is just off another bonanza of high-flying, high-carbon, high-taxing hypocrisy. This time on a trip to Brazil, he dripped with condescension for Canadians struggling to pay their bills. He said, it's really, really easy when you're in a short-term survive. I've got to be able to pay the rent this month. I've got to be able to buy groceries for my kids to say, okay, let's put climate change to a slightly lower priority. This is the Prime Minister burns 100 tons of jet fuel and releases 100 tons of greenhouse gases. When will he stop the high tax hypocrisy?
So if you guys didn't see that video, just a couple videos ago, I covered this. One that wasn't really broadcasted, but yes, he did say that mothers should prioritize climate change over feeding their children. Trudeau said this at the Global Citizen Climate Panel. It's absolutely appalling.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are facing global challenges right now. As much as the Leader of the Opposition would love to bury his head in the sand, global inflation, climate change that is impacting around the world requires us to be working together, standing up for peace and justice on the world stage, standing up for women's rights, standing up for opportunities for the middle class. This requires us to work together, something the Leader of the Opposition can't do. He can't even work with his own MPs. He has to muzzle them. He is not letting them be voices of their communities in Ottawa. That's the real colors of this Leader of the Opposition.
Only thing Trudeau stands up for is money laundering. He is sending so much of our money to other countries. I'll get into this in another video. I've gone down the rabbit hole, but just to clear up what he's saying there about muzzling MPs, mayors from different cities, different places like Butternut Valley, I mentioned maybe a week ago, are asking for some of that money, and Poilievre doesn't want his ministers to get involved in all that stuff because that money is going to get taken away when he becomes prime minister. Further complicates the whole situation.
His caucus wants to fire him, Mr. Speaker, and we know why. Food prices have risen 36% faster in Canada than in the U.S., a gap that opened up as the carbon tax came into force. The Prime Minister just goes on trying to tell Canadians that their mentality is off. He says there's a sense that affordability is in direct contrast with our moral responsibility to protect the planet, trying to shame Canadians for opposing his ineffective job-killing, inflationary carbon tax. Will you stop lecturing Canadians and call a carbon tax election?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, I invite Canadians to actually watch my remarks down south, where I was talking exactly about the importance of putting affordability first for Canadians, even as we're fighting against climate change. The Leader of the Opposition can invent things that he thinks I might have said. That's not what I said. What I pointed out was that even as we are fighting climate change, even as we are creating incentives to grow our economy in cleaner, greener ways, we are putting more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians with a Canada carbon.
Oh, please.
He's busy gaslighting Canadians.
This gaslighter, he is King Gaslighter. What a guy. What an absolute vile beast this man is. This will be a historic loss for a prime minister in this country when we finally get an election.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister has gaslit Canadians so much that Environment Canada has to do a recalculation of the carbon emissions that have come from the lamp. He's the Prime Minister who tells Canadians that the Parliamentary Budget Officer's data, which shows that 100% of middle-class people pay more in carbon tax than they get back in rebates, that they shouldn't believe their eyes, that they shouldn't believe their eyes when they see the grocery prices, which are rising 36% faster in Canada than the U.S. So instead of trying to gaslight Canadians, why not call a carbon tax election?
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is once again just not telling the truth. The reality is, the Parliamentary Budget Officer said that 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back from the price on pollution than it actually costs.
This is unbelievable. So this goes against parliamentary language, does it not? Yet he is telling a lie right now, this 8 out of 10 garbage.
them in paying that price on pollution. The cost of inaction on climate change is astronomical. And that's exactly what he's proposing. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition should stop misleading Canadians and actually understand that you can't fight for affordability, you can't fight against climate change unless you're investing in Canadians.
I know that certain comments cause a disturbance in the House, but I'll ask all members to be careful about the language that they use. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
His quadrupling carbon tax is all financial pain and no environmental gain. Today we learned that Canada, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, now ranks 62nd out of 67 countries for the Climate Change Performance Index. The Prime Minister says the Canadians starving or lined up at food banks should congratulate themselves for the fact that his tax has made us 62nd. We're 62nd, he pumps his fist into the air, Mr. Speaker.
Shameful.
Why does the Prime Minister make Canadians pay such high taxes to achieve such terrible results?
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Leader of the Opposition is entirely misrepresenting the facts for his own gain, for his own interest. That's really all he cares about. If he cared about Canadians, he wouldn't be standing against dental care. He wouldn't be standing against more spaces in childcare.
Oh, please, Trudeau, answer the question. 62nd. You've achieved nothing but steal our money.
He wouldn't be standing against putting more money in Canadians' pockets with a price on pollution that is bending our emissions down faster than our other G7 neighbors, at the same time as it's helping with affordability for 8 out of 10 Canadians in areas in which it lands.
There needs to be laws against this, just blatant lying in the House of Commons. Like, every time they lie, fine them $1,000. I said it before, put them 1 day in jail too. 1 day in jail, $1,000. Every lie.
Again on the rise, with 3 of the Bank of Canada's 4 measures now above target. And the finance minister admitted about a year ago that deficits cause inflation. And so she made this commitment in her budget, and I quote, the 2023-2024 deficit will be at or below $40.1 billion. Since then, the parliamentary budget officer says that number has been blown away. Will the Prime Minister tell us here and now how much was last year's deficit? How much?
Speaker, we just heard it once again from the Conservative leader. The foundation to his entire economic argument is that delivering programs to help Canadians in times of need somehow makes everything worse for everyone. He is proposing cuts to dental care.
It does, though. You're making life more expensive. This guy doesn't understand what he's talking about.
Cuts to childcare, cuts to the school food program, cuts to money on responding to the housing crisis in municipalities. His only answer to Canadians hurting is to cut services to them, while he exploits their fears for his own personal gain.
This is ridiculous. And if you think about it, the taxpayers are the middle bracket of Canadians, 25 to 55-year-olds. This age range doesn't get the dental program.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister misheard. It was the Minister of Finance who said that deficits cause inflation. The Prime Minister also said that every dollar of deficits contributes to inflation. And that's why they made the commitment, him and his finance minister, and I'm quoting here, to maintaining the 2023-2024 deficit at or below $40.1 billion, end quote. Last year's books have been closed for 6 years now. He certainly has all the data. Last 6 months. So how much was last year's deficit?
Mr. Speaker, I know the Leader of the Opposition is keen to see our fall economic statement, which will talk about measures that are there to help affordability, to support Canadians, to be there to invest in them. He's looking forward to seeing all these great measures we're putting forward to support Canadians in their time of need, because he can't wait to vote against them, Mr. Speaker. He can't wait to slash services and programs that are helping Canadians. He can't wait to stand in the way of us helping Canadians through this difficult time by putting the best balance sheet in the G7 in service of Canadians who need a little more support. He's voted against supports for Canadians. He's going to continue to.
It is him that admitted that deficit spending adds to inflation. Maybe that's why there's been a record increase in child poverty this year, with 1 in 5 kids now in poverty, 2 million people lined up at food banks. He has admitted it's not my worldview. He has now admitted that deficits contribute to inflation. So that's why he promised that the deficit would not go above $40.1 billion last year. He's had 6 months since that fiscal year ended. Does he even know what the deficit was in his own government?
I doubt it. He doesn't have the clue.
Mr. Speaker, obviously the Leader of the Opposition is keen to hear our fall economic statement, but the reality is he's only looking forward to it because he wants to vote against it, because he's going to vote against measures that support Canadians, measures to be there for Canadians.
Okay, Trudeau. I'll take a stab at this here. Fall economic statement. 10 million to the Congo, 10 million to Sierra Leone, 10 million to this African country, that one, this one, that one. All with the most corrupt warlords. Going to gender-sensitive farming issues, gender this, eco this, climate that. That's their economic statement. Taking our tax dollars, laundering them out to some other corrupt country around the world.
He's brought nothing but costs for everybody else, Mr. Speaker. He has a food program with no food. He has a pharma program with no pills. He has a gun buyback program that hasn't brought in a single gun, despite spending $67 million. He has a housing program that his minister admits doesn't build houses. But none of those things were the question. It was about his inflationary deficits that he admits drive up the cost of everything. So Canadians are watching and wondering, the guy in charge of this $500 billion enterprise called the Government of Canada knows anything about the numbers. So once again, does he even know the deficit for last year?
Mr. Speaker, he is eager to hear our fall economic update, and we will share it with him in due course. In the meantime, this House has work to do, Mr. Speaker, on passing legislation that's going to support school food programs, that's going to move...
No, Trudeau, no more of this. Hand over the SDTC documents to the RCMP. Get your orange jumpsuit ready. We've had enough of you.
He doesn't want to see Canadians helped right now. He wants to see Canadians hurt because he's only caring about himself.
9 years, this Prime Minister has doubled housing costs. In fact, 80% of people in Canada now believe, for the first time ever, that homeownership is just for the very rich. And the cities that have got money from his so-called housing accelerator have had the worst results. Vancouver, housing starts are down 18%. Toronto, down 21%. Ottawa, down 14%. Guelph, down 65%. Why doesn't he follow our common sense plan to cut out the bureaucratic middlemen and gatekeepers and instead use the savings to axe the sales tax and build the homes?
Once again, on housing, his own MPs have been asking us, for example, the $31 million we're sending to Kelowna in the riding of Kelowna Lake Country, a conservative riding. This is money that is going to make a real difference in their communities, but the Leader of the Opposition is preventing his MPs from standing up and advocating for their communities. This place is supposed to be a place where members are voices of their communities here in Ottawa. Instead, he's sending them to be his voice in their communities. That's not how it works.
This program is ridiculous. So my tax dollars and your tax dollars and everyone's tax dollars are going to help Kelowna. Great for the people of Kelowna and Toronto and Vancouver. But what about my small town? Or what about the town down the street? Or the one in Nova Scotia? Or the one in New Brunswick? Or the one in Northern Ontario? Or the one in Yukon? This isn't fair because not every city and not every town is going to get this money. Thus, I said it before, it has to be a self-sustaining system within the city itself. There are some rare cases where I can see sending extra money to a certain town or city that needs it, whatever extraordinary reasons. But this program is stupid. It's another thing they've designed that doesn't help Canadians at all. Somebody just yelled, "No one believes you."
Order.
Hug-a-Thug Bill C-83, which allowed Paul Bernardo to leave maximum security for more luxury and freedom in a medium security penitentiary. Now we learn that the Liberal government is blocking the family members of Paul Bernardo's victims from testifying in person at his parole hearing, where it will be considered for his release. Under Section 6.1 of the Corrections and Conditional Release Act, the minister could intervene to allow the victims to speak up. Why does he keep protecting Bernardo from the victims?
I think we should do a referendum here in Canada. Paul Bernardo gets out, he can go live with Trudeau.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition knows full well these are decisions taken by the Arm's Length Parole Board, and the Minister is engaged on this issue. But it won't prevent him from instrumentalizing the grief and anguish of families who are victims of crime for his own narrow personal gain. If he actually cared about public safety and national security, Mr. Speaker, he wouldn't have proposed to cut from the police services and border agencies. He wouldn't be proposing to put more guns on our streets, and he certainly would have accepted the national security briefings that would allow him to keep his own party safe.
Next up, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Congo is sitting there and watching this whole thing.
Tuminwa Tuluka, the Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Let me guess, another deal, a multi-million-dollar deal where our tax dollars are going to the Congo now. Is that what's going on? I betcha. Another session, Poilievre absolutely destroyed Trudeau. He can't answer a single question. Deficit, even his own statements there in South America about mothers feeding their children. Housing, you name it. Trudeau's got nothing. He's just an absolute liar. We need some serious rules changed in this country where we as the people can call referendum and get rid of a politician.